not as an employee, but as a federal consultant. The looks on the faces of the staff told a story of shock, relief, and quiet vindication. Because Emily wasn't seeking revenge, she was seeking accountability. And when Halverson attempted to interrupt, claiming she was a disgruntled former employee, the Navy commander silenced him with 3 words that changed everything. "You fired her," he said, "but you don't outrank her." And in that moment, the power dynamic flipped completely, revealing that Emily held an inactive commission that could be reactivated during federal medical emergencies, granting her authority over civilian administrators when veteran lives were at stake, a clause buried deep in contracts Halverson had never bothered to read. And as the investigation unfolded over the next several hours, more secrets spilled out: kickbacks from pharmaceutical suppliers, selective patient admissions based on insurance status, a pattern of denying care to veterans labeled as high risk. And with every revelation, Emily's role shifted from fired doctor to central witness, and by nightfall, Halverson was escorted out of his own office in handcuffs, while the hospital board issued a public apology. But the story didn't end there, because the true twist came weeks later when Emily declined the offer to become the new hospital director, choosing instead to establish a federally protected veterans trauma wing at St. Anne's, one that could never again be overridden by profit-driven administrators. And as the Navy helicopter lifted off that evening, leaving behind a hospital forever changed, Emily stood on the roof looking out over the city, understanding that sometimes justice doesn't arrive quietly. Sometimes it arrives with rotor blades, uniforms, and the undeniable weight of truth. And the lesson spread far beyond that hospital. That in America, the people who do the right thing may be pushed aside at first, but when they stand their ground, the consequences can land harder than anyone ever expects. Before this story even starts, do me a favor. Hit subscribe right now, because stories like this don't just entertain, they reveal how power, loyalty, and sacrifice collide in ways you'll never forget. If you believe truth always finds a way to surface, especially in America where justice can arrive from the most unexpected places, you won't want to miss a single story like this one. Now listen closely. The hospital director fired her without hesitation, his voice cold and rehearsed. The kind of voice that had ended dozens of careers from behind polished oak desks. And Dr. Emily Carter stood there silently as her ID badge was confiscated and her 30 years of service dismissed with a single sentence. The fluorescent lights of St. Anne's Medical Center humming overhead as if mocking the moment. And as she walked out past patients she had saved, nurses she had trained, and walls that still echoed with the alarm she had answered at 3 a.m. for decades, she believed, truly believed, that this was the end of her life as she knew it, because she had chosen ethics over obedience, truth over silence, refusing to falsify a report that would have protected the hospital's donors after a homeless veteran died from a denied procedure. And the director, Richard Halverson, made it very clear that integrity had no place in his balance sheets, so Emily left with nothing but her coat, her dignity, and a small cardboard box, unaware that exactly 11 minutes later, the thunderous roar of rotor blades would shatter the calm sky above the hospital, forcing every window to rattle and every conversation to stop as a Navy MH-60 Seahawk helicopter descended onto the hospital roof, its presence so shocking that traffic screeched to a halt 3 blocks away. Nurses ran to the windows, patients sat upright in their beds, and Director Halverson spilled his coffee all over his imported Italian suit as a voice crackled through the hospital's emergency radio, announcing a federal arrival. Because what Halverson didn't know, what no one knew, was that Dr. Emily Carter wasn't just a fired physician. She was a former Navy trauma surgeon who had once saved the life of a classified operative during a covert mission in Fallujah, a man whose real name never appeared on any document. A man now known only by rank and authority, and as the helicopter touched down, 4 Navy personnel stepped out with purpose, their boots striking the concrete in perfect rhythm, followed by a woman in civilian attire carrying a sealed folder marked with a red stripe, and as hospital security scrambled in confusion, the lead officer asked one question that cut through the chaos like a blade. "Where is Dr. Emily Carter?" And the irony was brutal, because at that exact moment, Emily was sitting in her car in the parking lot, hands shaking on the steering wheel, wondering how she would tell her daughter that she had lost the job that paid for her college tuition, when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize, but somehow felt compelled to answer. And the voice on the other end was calm, authoritative, and unmistakably military, telling her not to leave, telling her to stay exactly where she was, because the United States Navy had a few questions for her former employer, and back inside the hospital, Director Halverson was sweating as the civilian woman introduced herself as a representative from the Department of Defense Oversight Committee, explaining that an internal audit had flagged St. Anne's for unethical denial of care to veterans, falsification of medical outcome data, and intimidation of staff. And when Halverson attempted his usual charm, she slid the red-striped folder across the table, revealing photographs, emails, recorded calls, and sworn statements, including one from Dr. Emily Carter dated just 24 hours earlier. The report he each day had ordered her to alter, and that was when the twist deepened, because Emily hadn't just refused to change the report. She had sent it through a secure channel she was given years ago and never expected to use again, a channel reserved for medical professionals who had served in classified operations and were legally bound to report crimes against veterans. And as the Navy officer informed Halverson that the hospital was now under federal investigation and temporarily under military jurisdiction due to its government contracts, the director's authority evaporated in real time. While upstairs, the helicopter crew assisted in evacuating a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer who had been denied surgery earlier that morning and whose condition had worsened, the same patient Emily had fought for. And as she was escorted back inside the building,